The crystal-cold waters of Lake Superior entice adventurers to test their skills. For centuries, native fishermen, voyagers, and sailors have both delighted in her embrace and died in her fury. Beneath her sparkling surface lies the remnants of those tales, ships that broke under the power of her spell.
We live in a very tame world, and shipwrecks represent, in some ways, a real untamed sort of frontier. Going out and visiting one of these wreck sites, that's a unique experience for many people, and there's a lot of drama to that. And even for non-diving people, there's a fascination to shipwrecks. It's kind of strange, people wouldn't get interested in train wrecks in the same way. Shipwrecks are a little bit unique. But people who would go to Split Rock Lighthouse or some of the other lighthouses on shore here, they love the idea of standing there looking out towards the lake and hearing the story of a great shipwreck. And there's a lot of great shipwreck stories here in the Great Lakes. The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald is real familiar, but there's hundreds and hundreds of these wrecks, all with their own stories.
There are 350 wrecks scattered throughout Lake Superior. Today, those shipwrecks speak to a new generation of explorers, those seeking to discover what remains. Below the surface, divers swarm the hull of the Samuel P. Ely, a schooner barge built in 1869. The divers are measuring what Lake Superior and time have left them.
We don't want people to come out here and carve their initials in the site or take pieces of it away. By helping create a map and an appreciation for its historical significance, to divers visiting the site, it's no longer just going to look like a pile of boards. They're going to actually see a ship down there. And the drawings are also accompanied with descriptions, historical descriptions of the site, and that can be a message incorporated into that. Help us preserve these resources for the future.
The story of the Ely is classic. It's a story of unrelenting seas, heroic rescues, and ultimate defeat. In the late 1800s, commerce on the Great Lakes was making the transition to steam. The old sailing vessels became tow barges, increasing the carrying capacity per trip. On October 29, 1896, a steamer called Hesper left Duluth just before midday, towing 2 schooners, including the Samuel P. Ely. The pair fought gusting 50-mile-per-hour winds, high seas, and fear as they made their way toward 2 harbors.
Weather conditions had deteriorated, and there was a little bit of a mix-up when the tow line was dropped. The tug didn't pick up the line right away, and the Ely kind of drifted really out of control in toward the harbor and wrecked on the existing breakwater there, still with its crew on board.
A crew of 8 men was in perilous danger. Newspaper accounts tell a dramatic story. At 3 o'clock this morning, the schooner sank alongside the breakwater, and the men had scarcely time to get into the rigging. It was still dark, the wind was high, the sea was terrific, and the rain and the waves dashed against the men until they were wet through and numbed with cold. When the day broke, the men were all there, and the people of 2 harbors lined the shore and looked helplessly at the awful scene. Duluth Evening Herald, October 30th, 1896.
And with a little thought, what they decided to do was position themselves well out into the lake side of the accident, about 200 or 300 feet, and simply let a rowboat drift back on a line toward the wreck of the Ely. The people could get off into the rowboat, pulled up to the tug, and then allowed to drift back again, another group into the little boat, and pulled back up until they had rescued the crew of the Samuel P. Ely.
The Ely herself was a total loss. A salvage crew took her masts, rigging, sails, and tackle, and left the rest behind.
The Ely remains on the bottom, and it's pretty significant because it's a good example of vessel construction. It was built in 1869 and really intended for the iron ore industry, so rather heavily built, heavily planked, good-sized timbers all around. Even the ceiling or the inside planking of the hull in the cargo hold itself was fairly heavily constructed because they knew that the iron ore would be dumped in there and abrading that material.
They're not building vessels like this anymore on the Great Lakes. There's none of them afloat now. Historically, all these vessels sank or were scrapped, and the only surviving examples of these now are the wrecks themselves on the bottom. For that reason, the documentation of these sites and the preservation of these sites becomes a real tangible link to the maritime heritage of this area.